Hello and welcome to Byju's IAS. Let's get started and look into the first article. The first article says to stop a third wave, India has to mask up. Countries around the world witnessed a resurgence in the COVID-19 infections leading to second wave of the deadly virus. Whether it was in United States of America or in Brazil or in United Kingdom or in South Africa, what we actually witnessed is the second wave of the COVID-19 where all these countries were hit very hard, and following this particular pattern, it was quite expected that India would also see what is called as the second wave of COVID-19. But India was unprepared. The state was stumped by the spike in the cases, resulting in lack of beds, lack of oxygen cylinders, lack of oxygen concentrators, medicines, as well as death. In this particular backdrop, what we have to understand is that seeing the first wave followed by the second wave, we will also have the third wave. So, how is that we are going to stop the third wave or prevent the misery that would be caused by the third wave? First up, we have to understand the only solution to this COVID-19 virus is what is called as the vaccination. But can vaccination be provided to every person? Yes, we would be in a position to do it as well. But the problem right now is that this has to be done on a faster pace. But India would not be able to provide this vaccination to a large number of people until 2022. Why? That is because of India's population. When we look into India's population, as per the 2011 census, the population was as much 0.1 billion, and currently it has gone beyond 1.3 billion. So what we mean to say is that India would be able to provide vaccination to all its people, but the pace at which it would be able to provide will be comparatively slow. So the problem right now is that vaccination is not the solution. Why? Because the pace of vaccination, how many units are produced in the country, how many doses are given to the people, that will be having an undue delay. So the pace of vaccination with which India would be able to provide its population will be comparatively delayed. So people may not be able to get the vaccination on the time. Apart from this, what we have to look at is the supplies. Are the supplies happening on a regular basis? No. Why? Because there is a limit to how much of these vaccines can be produced in a particular day. Yes, we have AstraZeneca's Serum Institute of India, which is coming up with the Covishield vaccine. Then we have Bharat, which is also manufacturing the Covaxin as well. But what is the number of units that they would be able to manufacture? There is a limit as well. So the supplies are also limited when it comes to this particular vaccine. Added to the ooze is that the central government has also transferred powers to the state governments where they should be taking all these vaccines for the age group between 18 to 45. So there is a limit to the government finances as well. All of this means that we would be in a problematic area when it comes to administering vaccines to the people currently. Yes, we would be able to do it, but this will take a lot of time. So the author here speaks about it is not only important that we speak about vaccination, but we have to speak about non-vaccine interventions, non-vaccine changes that we have to introduce in the general public. So what are these non-vaccine interventions? When you look into the tests, when you look into the statistics, when you look into the experiments that have been done in the past, the most important non-vaccine intervention is mask wearing, physical distancing, hand hygiene, and a ban on the mass gatherings. This we all know, but unfortunately, the problem with the people is that we are not able to wear the mask in spite of repeated intervention. We are not able to keep up to the physical distances. We do not maintain the hand hygiene, and we continue to have mass gatherings in terms of marriages and weddings, in terms of religious congregation, and we continue to have parties after parties. So the author here speaks about carrying out the non-vaccine interventions. Apart from this, when you look into number of experiments or studies that have been conducted in the past, we have the American Journal of Tropical Medicine and Hygiene. According to this particular study that was conducted in 2020, it found that all those countries where either it is because of law or it is because of culture that people were able to mask themselves when they go out in general public. The amount of cases were comparatively less. There was another study, a small study that was conducted in the transmission among the family members in the Beijing households. Again, this particular study conveyed that if people have been using the mask, the amount of transmission or infection to another person was considerably less. Followed by this, we have another comprehensive review of the scientific study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. This once again said that universal adaptation of non-medical masks when people are out in combination along with some of the measures taken by the government will mean that the number of infections could be reduced in the near future. So all that we have to understand is that wearing mask is important, says number of studies that have taken place world over. When you look into the traditional idea, what does the traditional idea of mask wearing say? That you require the government, that you require the policing will have to take place when people step out of their houses, and if people have not wore the mask, they will either have to be fined or they have to be punishment. There has to be penalization as well, and sometimes a more lethal one of imprisonment also has to take place. That is what the traditional way speaks about. That is what we have been following as well, with fines and punishment, so on and so forth. But the author here speaks about importing another idea, that which has been successfully implemented in the country of Bangladesh. What is the idea that the author is trying to convey? The author here brings into picture what is called as a philanthropic organization, or the government will have to ensure that masks are provided free, they are comfortable to wear in the hot and the humid conditions, and at the same time it has to be accompanied by appropriate instruction material. What is this instruction material? Basically, few people might not know what is the advantage of wearing a mask. Few people might not know how a mask has to be worn. Few people might also have issues in wearing the mask as well. This is where the author brings into picture that we have to engage some of the religious leaders, we have to engage some of the celebrities, we have to engage the community leaders as well, so that all these people roped in, they would be in a much better position to convince that particular community people as well as the people in that particular area. So the traditional and the conventional idea is about enforcing the fines and the punishment, but instead of doing it, the government will have to use all these ideas, imaginative, creative communication campaigns, so that ultimately voluntary actions is taken up by the people. In fact, the author also suggests that when people enter into a public domain, and as they are in public domain, there has to be volunteers who have to be appointed. It is not the police officials or enforcement agencies, but what we require is the volunteers. These volunteers will also have to give an idea about the mask so that people are self-aware of it. So volunteers in public spaces will also have to remind people to wear the mask. So ultimately, communication is the key to bring an end to the menace of COVID-19, says the author. So the author says, yes, vaccination is what will bring the herd immunity. Vaccination is what will help us get out of this COVID-19, but we cannot always wait for this vaccine because it will take its time because of the limited supplies and the capacity of the government. And as a result, what we require is non-vaccine interventions in terms of mask wearing, physical distancing, hand hygiene, and banning on mass gatherings, giving masks for free, so that religious and other people are involved to make sure that people take it up on a voluntary basis. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says creating critical thinkers. The author here is trying to speak about reforms that have to be introduced in the educational sector and looking at alternative strategies of education assessment and evaluation. Let's try and understand what is the author trying to convey. We have number of state governments in India and also the central government which has currently suspended 10th standard examinations, and there have also been state governments as well which have also said they'll be postponement of the 12th standard examinations as well. So this article here is trying to convey or is speaking about alternative channels of assessment. Currently, when you look into the educational sector, what we have is two types of assessments. One is what is called as summative assessment. The other is what is called as the formative assessment. What is this summative assessment? This is what is called as the annual standardized test. Let's say, for example, we have the state exams that are conducted on an annual basis. Once and for all, a student is tested whether he has understood a particular concept or not. So the annual examination that we currently have in all the board examinations is what is called a summative assessment. So the author here is trying to convey that apart from the summative assessments that we currently have, we have to look at alternative strategies, and that is in the form of formative assessment. Now the question is, how should students be assessed? Should they be assessed at all? What is the need of assessment? When it comes to assessment of student learning is very important. Why? That is because the process of gathering, evaluating of the information, whether the student has understood it, whether he would be able to apply the concepts, needs to be introspected, and that is what the examination does. That is what the assessment does. So basically, assessment is a necessity, but how are we going to assess the students is what this article speaks about. One, do we have to go through the summative assessment, or we have to go through the formative assessment? The author here speaks about checking into an idea of what is called as formative assessment. What is this formative assessment? Let's say we have what is called as internal examination, or there is another process called as the synchronous form of assessment. So what is this synchronous form? Let's say, for example, currently because of COVID-19, we have the teachers, we also have the students who are engaging in the classes on a digital mode. So where are they engaging? This can be on the platforms like Zoom, or it can be on Cisco WebEx or any other platform as well. So what is happening? There is digital connection that exists between the teachers as well as the students. During this particular lessons that are being taught by the teachers, they also will have to ensure that during this particular interaction, they test the students whether they have understood or not. During this particular teaching process, they also have to give an idea to the students what will be the process of assessment, how questions can be asked. So during this particular interaction, they can say that within 1 week, what we will have is a viva, what we will have is an interaction between the teacher and the student. So what this form does is, in real time, the teacher will be teaching the students, and at the same time they may give a particular date of assessment where they can conduct a particular test in the form of viva. So a sample or a model question or the way of conduction is earlier given by the teacher to the student, but after a prescribed time, the students and the teachers will have a real-time examination. So this real-time examination can be in the form of viva. So the first formative assessment is in the form of internals, which can take place in real time. That is what is called a synchronous form. So they will have to set the specifications, realistic goals. Let's say they come up with a particular question paper pattern, or after every lesson they test the student whether they have understood the lesson or not. So this is happening on a real time basis. That is one of the procedure for the formative assessment. Another major dilemma that boards in India are currently going through and teachers have issues is with respect to exams that are being conducted online. Why? Because they sense that students may engage in the activity of cheating, because when it is digital mode, they have every provision of engaging in the cheating activity. So what does the author suggest? The author here suggests that the question paper pattern that is set should not be the one where the students would be able to find from the textbooks or by googling. So what is required is critical thinking questions that has to be given by the teachers. This is what is called as asynchronous form of testing. What is this asynchronous form? In the synchronous form, what we had is the real-time interaction between the teacher and the student that was happening on a digital form. But when it comes to the asynchronous form, let's say there is an examination that is being conducted by the teacher, let's say on the Google form or in any other way where the questions are in such a way that even if they Google this particular information or they have to test this particular question on one of the books, they would not be in a position to check it. So what we require is giving questions by the teachers such that they have to use their analogical thinking, critical thinking when it comes to answering. The third recommendation given by the author is timely testing of the student progress. This will involve multiple stakeholders, that is the teachers, then we will have the students, then we will also have the parents as well. So this ensures that everyone knows what the student areas of strength are, what are the challenges of the students, and if periodic revisions are required, that has to be provided by the teachers to the students. And at the same time, parents will also have to ensure that students know what they have to study and what are the strengths of the students to the parents as well. So a periodic upgradation and the process will have to be tested by all the stakeholders. Apart from this, when you look at current condition, there are students who have to write the 12th standard. After 12th standard, they'll be entering the higher educational institutions as well. There is a growing dilemma and confusion. How is that the higher educational institutes will have their examination? This is where the author suggests that he asks all the higher educational institute to facilitate what is called as the online examination. With the online examination in process, this confusion to a large extent will come down and the parents will breathe a sigh of relief, says the author. So going forward, higher educational institutions will have to conduct all the examinations online so that the parents and students will have some relief, says the author. These are some of the recommendations given by the author in reference to creating critical thinkers. When we look into the current system, when you look at students, how do they learn? We have a system of cramming, rut learning, as well as anxiety. So the emphasis in the current education system is more about marks, is more about intelligent quotient, but other strengths like the emotional, social, physical, and intellectual growth is not taken into picture by the current system. But one of the recommendation given by the National Curriculum Framework of 2005 made emphasis on all these parameters. But the current system does not believe in emotional strength but only believes in the intelligent strength. And as a result, a student will not have the overall development when it comes to the education sector. So going forward, it is not only about bringing in an aspect of intelligence, but it is also about respecting and teaching the emotional strength, social strength, physical and intellectual capacity. All these benchmarks will have to be laid in the near future when it comes to the future education, says the author. So in the near future, in order for us to redefine the education, we have to move away from the current system of cramming, rut learning and anxiety and move towards the overall curriculum and development of the student. In order to bring this to practice, what we have to do is to give complete autonomy to the educational committees. This educational committees will have the students, it will have the teachers, it will have the educational leaders, and we will also have scholars and researchers. Since it has all these people in picture, they have to devise one of the plans where they would be in a much better position to advocate, organize and implement this change nationally and also internationally. Only when we are able to reform the process of future assessment and also in the present crisis is when we will have a new change in the education sector, says this article. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says state repression that breaches public peace. We have the state government of Telangana which had issued a notification. According to this notification, it banned about 16 organizations under the Telangana Public Security Act of 1992. Why did the government ban these organizations? According to the government, they say that these are unlawful associations and their ideology or their whole attributions is related to one of the banned organizations called as the Communist Party of India, Maoist. This organization was banned by the government of India earlier because they had radical organization strength, their structure, and they indoctrinated people to take up arms against the government, which is why the central government had banned them. And on a similar lines, we have the state government of Telangana, which has banned about 16 organizations, basically because they feel they are unlawful in nature, and few of them also prescribe to the ideology of the CPI Maoist. So in this article, the author tries to critically analyze whether the position taken by the state government is right or wrong. First important question: what are the various reasons attributed by the state government as to why these organizations were barred or banned organizations? First up, it says that these organizations have been encouraging or aiding persons to commit acts of violence. So these organizations and its members were encouraging other members to take up or commit acts of violence, intimidate people, habitually commit acts of violence, and in number of cases they were also insisting people to go against the government established by law. It can be the state government or it can be the central government, since it was asking the people to commit acts of violence and asking people to take up arms against the government, which is why the state government of Telangana have brought these organizations under unlawful custody. Then there are a number of activities that are conducted by these groups who move in the urban areas, adopt guerrilla tactics, and take up different types of cover as per their strategy to wage war against the state. So the state here is not the state government of Telangana alone, it is the state in general. So it is the government in power, since they were using all types of guerrilla tactics and indoctrinating people, which is why they are banned, says the notification released by the Telangana government. The third reason given by the Telangana government says that they have joined hands with several organizations and alluring members into their folds so that they can fight against the central government as well as the state government. They have given inflammatory statements, they have been conducting meetings after meetings, and they have conducted rallies after rallies, and all these rallies, meetings, and inflammatory statement was against fighting the established government which was established by law. Finally, there were a number of activities that were being conducted by all these organizations, and they regularly kept in check, met the Maoist leadership in the forest areas of Chhattisgarh. Added to this, these organizations also wanted and were fighting for the release of P. Varvar Rao as well as G.N. Sai Baba. These are the people who are currently booked under UAPA and are currently in prison. So these are some of the arguments put forward by the Telangana government. This is where the author brings in an alternative perspective which says that issues and concerns raised by the Telangana government is not serving the purposes of justice, says the author. How does the author substantiate it? Let's say, for example, they are speaking about the release of P. Varvar Rao or G.N. Sai Baba. Every person who is culpable or who is in prison have their right. They can be fighting in the court of law. So asking and fighting for the release of such people is not wrong. Why? Because the investigation is yet to determine whether that particular person has committed the crime or not, whether he is involved in such a crime or not. So still it is not being proved. So every right of the citizen to fight for the release of P. Varvar Rao or G. Sai Baba until it is proved in the court of law is a legitimate right, says the author. Then the author says we have one of the important laws, that is Unlawful Activities Prevention Act, or what we can call as UAPA. So what happens? These people are also fighting against this particular law. So the author says that there have been number of petitions that are filed in the Supreme Court of India for calling this particular law unconstitutional. So petitions have been filed as well. Why? Because this is the legitimate right, legal right of the people. This is an ultra vires to the constitution. This is violating some of the principles of the fundamental rights, and it is not giving respect to the dignity of life. Why? Because people are put behind bars for as many as 180 days, and getting the bail under this particular law is not that easy. So people have already questioned about the legitimacy of this particular law, where the executive have been given massive powers under UAPA. So if people have already filed petitions in Supreme Court, what is wrong in these organizations questioning the very basis of UAPA is another argument put forward by the author. Therefore, the author says because of the COVID-19 crisis, the government was not able to handle the COVID-19 issue, mismanaged the public health and safety, and therefore endangered the public security. In order to make sure that the blame game does not shift on the government, they have created a smokescreen by invoking this draconian legislation and have banned these organizations, says the author. Therefore, the government, instead of entering these folds of banning organization until and unless it is proved, what it has to do is to focus on other things of managing the public health crisis, distress caused to the public at large, and demonstrate due diligence when it comes to fulfilling the constitutional obligations when it comes to the directive principles of the state policy in terms of reference, says the author. So the author says, yes, if these banned organizations are legitimately going against the state and if it is proved in the court of law, such should be banned immediately. But the current crisis is unfolding and there have been a lot of deaths as well. So that should be the primary focus of the government, says the author. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the next article. This article says Myanmar Air Force bases attacked. What is important for us is that we understand that there are two important places in news. One happens to be the city of Magwe, the other happens to be the city of Meiktila. Remember that the city of Magwe and Meiktila is important from the preliminary examination point of view and is in the country of Myanmar. Why are these cities important? That is because when you look into the Asian Highway 1 happens to be the longest route of the Asian Highway network. And when it comes to Myanmar, we have one of the expressways called as Yangon Mandalay Expressway. And one of the cities that it travels through happens to be Meiktila. So kindly remember, Meiktila is part of the Asian Highway 1 and it is in the country of Myanmar. So this can be important in places of news when it comes to the preliminary examination. The article further makes a mention of what is called as the Current National Union. What is this Current National Union? This happens to be a rebel group that we see in the country of Myanmar. They are the dominant political organization representing the Karen community where in the border areas of Thailand. There is one of the state called as Karen. This is along the border areas of Thailand. So what this particular community or this rebel group is looking for is for an independent self-determination state which has a population of about 1.6 million people, roughly around the size of Belgium, and they want an independent state or they are looking for self-determination. Why? In this particular state of Karen, they are the ethnic majority. Why are they looking for a self-determination or self-determination action? That is because they have been not represented under the Myanmar central government. Since the independence of 1949, this Karen National Union has been fighting against the central government primarily because they have been not represented at the national level and the majority of the positions have been held by the Bamar community. Since the Bamar community has held all the primary positions and the Karen community is not represented at the national level, which is why they have gone against the central government. That is what is being said. And apart from that, we have the international bodies like the United Nations who have also said since the rockets were launched and it is along the border areas of Thailand, this may also mushroom into what is called as the country crisis resulting in border conflict. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. Now let's look into the mains practice questions. In the unprecedented pandemic, vaccine development and vaccine administration is time consuming. Suggest non-vaccine interventions to prevent, monitor and treat COVID-19. Next question. Coronavirus presents an opportunity to redefine the future of education by reassessing our priorities. Discuss how the educators and policymakers can bridge the existing gap and evolve a paradigm shift in learning practices. So please write all your answers on the comment section. Peer review. Do give positive feedback to your friends' answers. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.